Morning, everybody.
Ready.
And roll call.
Yes. Chair Showalter.
Here.
Director Meadows. Here. Director Klein.
Here.
Director McIntosh.
Present.
Thank you. We have a quorum present. We are missing Director Martinez Beltran and Tyson.
Okay, so now we come to public comment on matters not on the listed agenda. The public may provide comments on any matter not listed on the agenda, provided that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of SVCE. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone here?
Yes.
All right, welcome in 3 minutes. Oh, hi, Bruce. Skipped over you.
So Silicon Valley Clean Energy's goal to bend the carbon curve is shared by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, although they can't say it explicitly. They're working on health, we're working on climate. I attended the May 8th meeting in San Francisco when public comment was solicited. I did it by Zoom. The comments were strongly in favor, but there were many opposed. And in fact, the board shifted dramatically from their vote 3 years ago when it was all but unanimous to a nearly evenly split board. So one of the things I'm going to be doing over the next few months is trying to persuade members of the Bay Area Air District Board to vote yes when the time comes in October. The argument that I think I'm going to be leaning into is the affordability of electricity compared to gas. I think most people believe that electricity prices have grown faster than gas prices over the last few years, but that is actually not true. If you compare March this year with March 3 years ago or 6 years ago, in both cases, natural gas prices have risen faster than electricity prices. Both have risen quite dramatically. It's a pain point. Affordability is a big issue. But if you look into the future with a declining flow of gas and fixed infrastructure overhead, which has to be paid for by the people who actually buy gas, the forecast is for a very dramatic escalation over the next decade in the price of gas. Electricity is the opposite. The infrastructure is going to be flowing more electrons around, and so the cost of the overhead of the electricity system should grow more slowly. And in fact, we've seen recent changes in PG&E's prices, of course, SVCE's prices to reduce electricity costs. So I'm going to hand out my cheat sheet of the directors, where they stand. If you know any of these people and feel you can influence them, particularly those on the bottom half of the sheet, I encourage you to reach out. And so I will end my comments, just pass that out.
Thank you very much. I'll pass that around. All right, is there anyone else in the room wishing to speak? No. Do we have anyone online?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, so that ends public comment. And that brings us to the consent calendar. We have 2 items on that, and because the executive director has asked one to be moved. So I have asked her to just give us a sort of 2-sentence summary of the new one, and then we'll ask her about.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
And just give us a 2-sentence summary of the
Item number 5.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, and we have Zach Lesky on the line too, if you want any detailed questions about it. But yeah, so SVCE is a part of California Community Power, CC Power. We formed this super JPA back in, I think, 2022. And through CC Power, we're allowed to execute joint agreements for all kinds of services, but mostly clean resources. And so as a member, we're subject to certain fees for general and administration fees. And then they have this process where we could use to opt into different types of projects, RFOs, third-party vendor agreements type things. And so that's an opt-in process, but we have to set aside some money in the event that we want to opt into those programs. And so there's 2 big components to their budget. There's the ongoing G&A, which covers a lot of personnel costs and some of their support services. And then there's the big opt-in, which we call phase 2 part. And then because we have PPA signed with them, there's also this phase 3 portion. And there's some obligations that we have there, like we have a big project coming online next month. And they're doing some of the services related to that contract. And so last year, we brought this to the board, and we bring this every year, asking to give me authority to basically pay the membership dues and set aside some money for us to also opt into some programs and then cover the cost that we have associated with our existing power purchase agreement to phase 3 resource with Tumbleweed. So Zach, did I leave anything out? No, okay. But it's a very detailed presentation and staff report as well. If you get that chance.
That's okay, we'll get that straight. All right, I think that was very clear, thank you. So, do I have well, first we need to see, is there any public comment on the consent calendar? No. All right, seeing none, then I would ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as set forth in the agenda, item 1 and moving item 5 to consent.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. And so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you. So now we move on to the regular calendar. First thing up is the CEO update.
All right, I'm going to keep my portion of the comments very brief since we have such a big agenda, but I did want to invite Zoe Elizabeth, Director of
Director of many things.
Director of many things, to come and give 2 updates, one on the Bay Area Air District meeting that happened last week that the public comment we heard from Bruce just a second ago, and then second to give you a really brief update on where we are with respect to the building, our new headquarters. So Zoe?
Fantastic. So the last time we gave an update on the Air District, the meetings were coming. And we also gave an update that there had been public comment. That was during the board meeting that we were here. There was a public comment meeting. About 150 folks showed up. More or less, it was about 50 folks that were had concerns about the rules and 100 that were very strongly in support. Then the following week went to board comments. We heard an overall summary. I'd say that the conversation was robust and thoughtful, right? People are really taking this seriously. There's been a lot of change on the board since the rules were passed 2 years ago. So a lot of questions. 2 of the key points that I also wanted to raise is that they directed staff to bring back a model permitting ordinance to the stationary committee and an overview of current funding landscape analysis. That will go to the stationary source committee this summer or early fall. So not surprisingly, a lot of the concern comments are around upfront affordability. As you all know, this is a key thing that SVCE works on. It's the function of our programs is really to help drive down the costs. We know one of the reasons the costs are so high is right now there's not enough demand to kind of stimulate the market to do everything the market does well. These rules, if implemented well, could help to create that stimulation. But we are working really closely with the 7 other Bay Area CCAs on a region-wide contractor program, as well as some other things to move the market forward, should the rules go ahead as they are. And if there's changes, we will continue to move forward and pivot as necessary. And then on the building, I think that at the last board meeting, I did mention that things were delayed, that we did have our first, I got to say on time, on budget, so many times in a row, and it was great. We all knew it sometimes happens in construction. There were some delays. And our current schedule has moved back to about the end of August when things should be fully done. We are working on a plan so that we can hopefully move in and have temporary occupancy ahead of that. But we need some more information from the contractor to ensure all the safety mechanisms will be in place.
I should add to that, our plan is to move everything out of here because we have to be out of this space by the end of July. And so we'll be moving everything to the new building, setting up there. In the event that we can't occupy the space, we're setting up backup locations for our staff to meet, the very few staff that will come in the month of August. And then we've also set up arrangements with the city of Sunnyvale to continue to use their board chambers for board meetings till we're fully up and running in the new building. So we have plans on how to operate. We'll be okay. That concludes my CEO report.
Anything public comment on the CEO report? All right, okay, let's move on to 3.
You need to do it.
I know, I thought I just said
Yeah,
that.
you did.
Yeah.
That's okay. Is
Yeah,
there
it went
anyone,
along.
is there anyone on the Zoom?
Nobody with their hands raised.
And nobody?
No comment.
All right, so I think we can check that one off, and it's okay, move on to 3. I know I sound a little funny with this, it's just, Mohs surgery, it's not short duration, guys, I'll be better in a few weeks. Okay.
Been there.
Select, we need to select.
Going there.
Yeah. Select vice chair of the 2026 executive committee. And we're going to have a report by Andrea.
Thank you. All right, so now we have our full roster for this group. So today we're hoping to select the vice chair for 2026. A reminder on process, we'll take nominations first, including self-nominations. Anyone interested will be given an opportunity to speak. If there's more than one person, we'll do a vote by name until we reach 4 votes to get a majority to pass. And then if there's more than one person, we'd also request that there is a ratification vote to solidify the selection.
4, not 3.
It's a majority of the whole group of 6.
Oh, it's 6. Okay, I was thinking. Okay.
Right.
We're all.
So has anyone reached out to you with interest about this?
Formally, no. I know that Director Martinez Beltran has expressed interest in the past, so I don't know if we can ask her if she's interested, but formally, no.
Want me to bring her over here? Is she,
She's in with the dog, yeah, I saw.
but is she in on the?
She's not in Zoom meeting yet.
Oh, when you said she was gonna be late, I thought you meant physically here.
She is
She's-
here,
Oh,
but she has a dog and is having to
okay, that's all right. No,
in the same,
room with the dog.
yes.
Does the dog get to vet?
It used to be a requirement for every Zoom meeting to have a dog.
That would be nice.
Just kidding.
Good, how are you?
Okay, all right, so, thank you for joining us in person.
Yes.
We have,
What company?
we're on, item 3, select a vice chair. And we are to the point where we want to see if there's any interest in being a vice chair.
Well, I certainly have interest.
Is there more than anyone else to?
I was the vice chair before, so I'd be interested, but, you know.
Are you interested or not?
Yes.
Let's be clear.
Cut to the work.
Okay, so do you two want to make short statements or you want to?
Sure. I mean, I've been serving with the Silicon Valley Clean Energy. I absolutely love this role. Being a board member, I think being on the executive committee is an awesome opportunity for any of our board members to get to know more with the staff, to work more deeply with the issues that we're facing. And I would really love to be the executive committee vice chair so that I can continue to be involved in those conversations and keeping the pulse on what's going on. And hopefully continue to use that in leadership later, so.
Okay, all right,
I'll withdraw my interest.
okay, all right, well, do we still have to have a vote?
Yes, please, if somebody could make a motion.
Wait, I would like to ask a question, if that's all right. So, but you both have been vice chair in your case and vice chair and chair in your case, right? Of the executive committee.
Of the executive committee, yeah.
Okay, so, all right, just wanted
So
to,
both have good experience.
yes.
Okay, all right, are there any more comments? All right, public comment?
No hands raised on that.
All right, so we need a motion.
I'll make a motion
Okay.
for you to be the vice chair of the executive.
Excellent. All right, so we
Thank
have a motion by Director Mikachek and a second by Chair Klein. And we're just doing a hand vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. All right, let's.
And there's a
move on.
woof from under the table.
Sorry. All right, now we go on to 4, integrated resource plan preview and recommend the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Board of Directors delegate authority to the chief executive for final approval. And I believe we'll. I'm not sure who's-
We have two staff presenting. We have Director of Regulatory Policy and Planning, Martin Wenzel, and Power Resource Planner, Jessica Fink, presenting.
Great, thanks, Monica. Good morning, everybody. So yes, we're here today to talk about our 2026 Integrated Resource Plan. Jumping ahead, so we want to provide an overview of the IRP process and also share our initial draft results. This plan is due to the PUC on August 10th. Historically, we've tried to bring sort of substantially complete IRPs to both executive committee and the board. But because of timing this year with the July recess, we're going to have to bring just sort of a high-level overview of the results and some of our key talking points. So just something I wanted to flag up front. So we'll go through the CPUC's purpose and requirements for the IRP. We'll talk about how we developed our IRP, and we'll get into those results, and then finally talk about additional analyses. And then we do have a request of the executive committee at the end. So the IRP itself is really first and foremost a compliance requirement, as we'll get to in a minute. Ideally, the IRP process provides some useful insights into our internal planning processes, but there's some pretty big disconnects in assumptions between how we view the world, how the CPUC does. So that creates some challenges for us. But fundamentally, what the IRP is all about for the CPUC is making sure that we're on track to develop an electric system which maintains reliability while achieving the state's clean goals. So this cycle is really about how we get from roughly 30 million metric tons of emissions in the electricity sector today down to 8 million metric tons or fewer by 2045. So what the CPUC does is it requests each individual LLC submit an IRP, and then those plans are stitched together to form what they call a preferred system plan. That preferred system plan is used for a number of analyses and planning processes, perhaps the most important of which is the CAISO transmission planning process. Historically, we've been requested to file this IRP every 2 years, but the CPUC skipped the 2024 cycle, so this will be our first IRP since 2022. So the filing itself is composed of 3 components. The first is called the Clean System Power Tool, or the CSP. This is essentially a calculator to check whether or not we're meeting compliance with the CPUC set emission targets. So fundamentally our share of that 8 million metric tons. So it checks for a few different key study years, and the inputs and assumptions in that model are dependent upon sort of, once again, that CPUC view of the world and what emissions and curtailment will look like in the future. The second thing we file is called a resource data template, and this is essentially a list of all of our contracts, both things that we already have in our portfolio, as well as resources we plan through this process to add to our portfolio. Importantly, this isn't a binding plan, it's just our best guess of the resources we would need to add to hit these targets. The other thing the RDT does is check for that reliability need. It uses what we call effective load carrying capability, or ELCC metrics. So that means that the reliability check in the IRP is not actually aligned with the metrics that we use in the resource adequacy program. So a little bit of a disconnect there. The final thing we submit is the narrative. This is probably going to be a 60 to 80 page document where we talk about the modeling process and our results. It gives us an opportunity to talk about the risks and viability associated with these portfolios. And it also has a lot of very sort of specific things we have to chat about in the narrative. So we'll talk about things like disadvantaged communities and how our plan would impact them, how things like the central procurement entity might impact us, and many other specific topics that we're required to talk about. As I've already hinted at, the CPUC mandates many of the inputs and assumptions that we have to use in this IRP. So some things like candidate resource profiles, future system emissions, and reliability metrics we must use. There's other things that we get from the CPUC that we have the ability to use, but don't necessarily have to follow completely. So as an example, we look at the CPUC's assumptions for future resource prices, but we sort of just use that to gut check to make sure they're reasonably aligned with our own view of the world. But the really key assumption that I want to flag for you today, as we look at these results, is that the CPUC's view of the load forecast going forward is very different from SVCE's, and in fact, very different from their own view of the world just 4 years ago. So the blue line here shows the forecast that we are required to use for this IRP. The orange line is our internal forecast, and the gray line was the forecast from 4 years ago. So there's almost a 60% increase relative to 4 years ago for the 2035 forecast. So when you see the results, it might look like a lot of capacity. It is a lot of capacity, but a lot of it's being driven by this. As part of every IRP, we are required to file what's called a preferred conforming plan, and then we have the opportunity to file additional alternate conforming plans. Many LSEs opt to only file one plan. Historically, SVC has tried to file at least 2 plans because we think it makes it easier to talk about the pros and cons and trade-offs as we look ahead into the future. So what we're proposing is that our preferred conforming plan, which is the plan that by default will be used for things like the transmission planning process, aligns with the current adopted board targets, which are listed here. We then propose to use an alternate conforming plan, which is really intended to be a proxy for the levers discussions that Justin's been having with the board. I think he'll talk more about those later today. We do want to use a pretty extreme proxy of that. So here we're assuming that 50% of our load would move to a minimum compliance target. So it's important that you have a pretty meaningful difference between the 2 plans. Otherwise, you're not going to get enough of a difference in result to really talk about things. In addition to the formal plans that we intend to submit, we're doing a couple of other scenarios. One, we're going to do a run. In fact, we have it. We can show you the results today using our internal load forecast. This is optional, but something that we think is important to highlight. And then the second scenario is one in which we force in allocations from the central procurement entity to talk about how that would impact our potential build out. And that's something that the CPUC has asked that we cover this cycle. We don't have those results quite yet, but I do intend to have them in time for the June board meeting. So quick summary of the process. We obviously have put together our input assumptions. Those input assumptions are then fed into a capacity expansion tool, which tries to create a least cost set of resources in order to meet load as well as all of the targets that we prescribe to the model. Well, we generally try to calibrate that capacity expansion model with the CPUC compliance requirements. There always ends up being a little bit of a disconnect. And so we do some post-processing to make sure that we're hitting all of the targets we need to. So that work is, I'll say, fundamentally complete. There's still some review we need to do and a couple of tweaks, which I'll point out in this presentation. So we're now largely moving into sort of the final phase of this, where there's some additional analyses we need to do, and then development of the compliance deliverables, including writing much of the narrative. So with that, I will jump into the results. So this is what we are looking at today for our preferred conforming plan. Once again, what it would take in order to achieve our board adopted targets with the forecast provided by the CPUC. So we add nearly 4 gigawatts of additional capacity in this scenario. I will point out that the one thing we are expecting to change is the 2030 geothermal numbers. We're going to bring that down quite a bit. But overall, quite a bit of build, a pretty diverse set of resources, hybrid, quite a bit of onshore wind, solar, geothermal, and a variety of storage. Now, I know I already teed up the fact that a lot of this growth is coming from a large amount of load growth assumed in the model, but also important to bear in mind that a lot of the resources we have under contract start to roll off in the 2030s. So a significant portion is also to replace those contracts. And we do allow the model to select some short-term products. So that's not part of the roughly 4 gigawatts I just showed you. And in most years, it is binding on the upper end of that threshold that we've allowed it to hit. So nearly 35% of our energy is coming from short-term products. You'll notice a couple of funny little spikes in the years where there's an emissions target assessment. As we'll get to in a minute, that's because the model that the CPUC requires us to use assumes quite a bit of curtailment. And so we have to over-procure in order to adjust for that. As I pointed out, in addition to hitting emissions targets, we have to hit our RA compliance. The way we do this is we have the model do an initial check for RA, but then once again in that post-processing, we will backfill with some additional short-term fossil in order to hit our requirements.
Maureen, can you just remind the executive committee what RA is?
Yeah, sorry, the resource adequacy requirements. So basically our capacity obligations from the CPUC. So on average over the planning horizon, we meet about 60% of those RA needs with clean resources. And after we backfill with short-term fossil, we're still using less than our load share of what the CPUC assumes to be available across the system. There are 2 years where we violate that, but it's by a pretty small margin. So and it's also at the end of the horizon, so we're relatively comfortable with that. A thing to point out, these are the emissions results. Our targets are up there in red. So of course, our portfolios are compliant with the emissions requirements. But as I mentioned, there's quite a bit of curtailment assumed in the CPUC's models. And so we're losing almost 20% of our energy in the forecast. So what this ends up meaning is that when you look at the CPUC compliance tool, even though we're saying this portfolio is meeting our RPS target of 100%, the CPUC views this to be only an 80% achievement. What we're thinking about this is that we're already adding so much energy, and there's reasons why I think in the narrative can reasonably question some of these curtailment assumptions. So we don't want to force more capacity in. We'll just sort of speak to this discrepancy in the narrative, but wanted to highlight it for the board. Oops, I skipped a slide there. So these are the results of the alternate conforming plan. Still quite a bit of diversity in the resources, but we're procuring about 600 megawatts less in this version of the world. Similar story for the reliability in the alternate conforming plan, but we are leaning on the system a bit more because we have less of that new build. And so in some years, we're using as much as 85 megawatts above and beyond our load share allocation of the gas fleet, which arguably is a reason why this is a portfolio that we might not be as comfortable with. Finally, very similar story on the emission slides. Curtailment drops because we have fewer resources in our portfolio, but because we're leaning on the system more, our RPS numbers still come in about 10% lower than the preferred case. So with that, I'll jump into just a summary of the additional analyses that we're trying to do. First, this is the results of our alternate load scenario. About 2,200 megawatts fewer capacity procured in this scenario. I will note that because we don't have GHG targets from the commission for this lower load forecast, we haven't done that additional post-processing. So theoretically, we might have needed to add a little bit more, but overall, a pretty wildly different outlook if you were to use our internal forecast.
That's a cumulative number through 2045.
Correct. Yeah, the difference is a cumulative number on the side. The graphic itself is an annual build, so not cumulative. A couple of additional pending analyses we are working on. First of all is that scenario with the potential central procurement entity impacts. So we're gonna force, I think it's about 180 megawatts of offshore wind in our portfolio, and I think 20 megawatts of both geothermal and long duration storage. So we'll then do cost analysis and risk analysis for each portfolio. We don't have exact figures for that yet, but we can say that we know the alternate conforming plan is going to be less costly because by nature, that's how the model is what the model is trying to optimize for. The final thing is or not quite the final thing, the final analytical exercise is a reliability analysis, seeing how the ELCC is used in IRP compared to slice of day.
Can you just define ELCC
Yes, the effective load carrying capability.
and the difference between that and slice of day?
The ELCC metric is a probabilistic metric about how valuable a resource is towards meeting compliance, whereas slice of day metrics, also probabilistic, but they're trying to show what a resource can provide on an hourly basis. So ELCCs are an annual metric, whereas slice of day, the value of a resource varies over each of those 24 hours. The final thing we are working on is assessing the transmission viability. We have some outside consultants helping us with that. A couple of key narrative points we intend to touch upon in that narrative. First of all, our portfolio is putting a lot of geothermal and a lot of onshore wind in. And so we want to talk about how we see the value of clean, firm resources, as well as the need to build out additional transmission in order to enable both the geothermal and the onshore wind. Another thing we're likely to point out is that the model is not selecting geothermal because it likes, steam from underground. It's selecting it because it likes firm, clean, 24-hour resources. So we didn't explicitly model emerging technologies like carbon capture and storage, or advanced nuclear, but that could ultimately be what actually fills that need in our portfolio. We'll talk about load forecast uncertainty. We'll talk about the planning challenges associated with that central procurement entity. Likely talk about the lack of alignment between IRP and RA metrics, assuming that comes to fruition through our analysis. One thing I didn't mention up front is that because of AB 846, we are not allowed to consider Diablo Canyon in our IRP planning processes. So even through 2030, when we know the plant will be online, we're not allowed to put those attributes into our portfolio. But if the plant is extended again, we definitely want to make sure that that's considered for planning going forward. And then the last piece, and I recognize this is maybe a little bit of a non sequitur relative to all the modeling I've been talking about, but you all may have heard me talk in the past about the Reliable Clean Power Procurement Program, or the RCPP. This is intended to replace order by order procurement and create a more stable procurement process for LSEs going forward. And hopefully will address a lot of the procurement risks that we see. So we want to, in our narrative, talk about the importance of getting that completed. So with that, I will pause for questions in just a moment, but maybe just read the request of Executive Committee today. So we're seeking support from the Executive Committee to recommend to the Board of Directors at the June 10th meeting, first adoption of the proposed preferred conforming and alternate conforming plans for submission. Recognizing there may be some additional edits. As I said, there's definitely at least one edit we intend to make before June 10th, but there may be a few that we have to make even after the board meeting. And because of that, to ultimately delegate authority to the CEO for final approval of our plan, which will be due August 10th. With that, I will pause and turn it back to the chair.
All right, so this is a very new topic. And I'm sure that there are questions. So who would like to start?
Yeah, I can just start. So you mentioned a little bit about transmission viability. So, this is the CPUC, or basically saying this is how much you need to meet. But we already hear about PG&E not delivering in the short term, that, this capacity to our customers. Is there any, and you talked about there's external experts from that standpoint, is there any kind of pushback of you're trying to push us on, procuring the appropriate amount when our distributor for Northern California mainly isn't able to meet these goals currently? And just figuring out how that plays into the overall narrative.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. I think during our 2022 IRP, we tried to justify how the portfolio could fit into the existing transmission structure. And we're taking a slightly different tack now, which is because this plan ultimately informs the transmission planning process, there's an argument, I guess this is implicitly the argument we're making, that we want to be a little bit aggressive with what we think we need for transmission planning to make sure we're sending that signal to the CAISO that we would like to see lines to allow that out-of-state wind, and we'd like to see more lines into core geothermal zones. So there's always been this sort of debate of the chicken and the egg with IRP, right?
Yeah.
Do you do the TPP or the IRP? And so I think we're now leaning into this idea that we want to send a clear signal to the CAISO to build the transmission. But fair point that even if we do that, there might be delays and challenges with the actual build out.
Okay. And to me, but that to me is kind of a critical portion of that narrative, because, it's like they have their estimates and we procure, and it directly affects our customers conceivably for power when the main distributor isn't meeting those goals and has no plans to really meet those goals in the short term. And so especially as you look at, the next 2 or 3 years, and it's a different view if you go out 5 or 10 years, like PG&E will make all kinds of promises, but, it's like we deal with long-term contracts, and meeting the CAISO's requirements makes it difficult for us as well as our customers. So that, to me, it would be interesting to see. So we'll have all that by the June meeting. The transmission viability portion of.
We probably won't have the transmission viability portion by the June meeting. I think if it's of interest to the board when we do have sections done, we're happy to send them along.
Okay.
They just might not be things we can vote on given the time.
Understood. And so, so I'm fine with that. I understand it's a moving target, and this board not having a ultimately meeting summer. And so conceivably the final document. That being said, if you need a set of oversight, I would say a special executive committee meeting might be viable, just to have at least a portion of the board reviewing that document to give potential feedback on your August 10th or whatever deadline. So I'll just throw that out there. Signing everybody up in case, but I do think, and not that we need another meeting, but if you need that input, if you think that's valuable, and it's at least good messaging for the entire board that, okay, we're not going to force all of you to have another meeting, but a portion of the executive committee that can make that meeting, we'll do whatever to try to do that. But I do think, it's good to have a separate set of, now, staff does a fantastic job, but I do think that because it's kind of, this is the organization's role, this is what, it's an important part of that. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I actually had just written down that we might want to suggest that there be individual briefings on this offered by the staff, the directors, because it is a meaty topic, and we do that in our city on big topics, and it gives people an opportunity to ask a lot of questions in a very comfortable setting. So I don't know if you have time to do that, but this is really the meat of what's our program. And from an educational point of view, it's very important for board members to understand it. Okay, who else has questions?
Thank you.
So, great presentation. So you said that you're proposing that we submit 2 cases, and that's allowed but not required by the CPUC. So how will they consider 2 cases then?
Yeah, a very good question. Historically, the only case that they use for their downstream processes is the preferred conforming plan. So there's, in some ways, there's limited value to the alternate plan. But we still see value in it because when you're talking about things like the cost analysis section or the risk analysis section, if you don't have an alternate plan to sort of compare things to, it feels, I don't want to say it's insufficient because many LSEs do it, but it doesn't feel as complete of an answer, I guess I would put it.
Maybe I'll add that, so many LSEs take this approach as purely a compliance document. So the preferred is, or the conforming is what all they have to do.
Right.
And that's like, okay, we've done what was asked for, we looked at it. This is a non-binding plan, I should state that, right? So
Regardless of which, they're
regardless, they're non-binding, they're
okay.
just to inform the policy, the planners, the
Right.
policymakers, and this transmission planning process, which is really important. And then others like us have historically taken it as an opportunity to kind of see what we truly believe we will be planning for in the next, whatever, 20 years or whatever it is. And then making that comparison to what the state is requiring is important for us to understand, so that when we do procurement, we can kind of align around, okay, what do? We think this, but the state thinks this, what's the kind of middle? So we use it as a tool internally to help direct our operations. But again, it's a snapshot in time. The benefit is to see how much capacity you would have to add and the relative trade-offs between the different technologies or resources available. But it's not a binding plan.
Right. So given that then, why, I see the value to us for the alternate conforming plan, especially because we do probably more risk assessment than some of these other organizations. They might want to not know the risks, I don't know, but sometimes there is that, right? So we can still do it, but not submit it when that, if the CPUC is going to always use the preferred conforming plan, then why would we submit 2 documents? Why wouldn't we just create it and use it internally? I'm talking about submitting 2 plans when one is required and that dynamic.
I would say that what we'll end up submitting, there will be one narrative document. So
Okay.
we'll speak to both of them and the trade-offs between them in that narrative. We do submit a CSP and an RDT for both of the plans. But in order to get results, you functionally need to develop those anyway. So it's not a huge additional staff lift to do that. And there theoretically could be a world in which they decide for some purpose to use that alternate conforming plan. I think it's also, if you submit all of the compliance materials, it's sort of a signal to them that you went through the steps and really looked at this in detail.
I agree, and it's good for the board to see that too, and the board ultimately adopts both plans. You recognize that there's a difference there as well. Director Manager?
This is good. It's a lot of work. So I've got a number of questions and some may have already been answered. My first one is, does this obligate SVCE to do anything? I think, Monica, you said it doesn't, this document submission.
Yeah.
Or, sorry.
No. I think, Monica did hint at that. No, I think in the 2022 cycle, there was some discussion about binding plans. I think that discussion has largely subsided. So we don't see it as a risk that this would actually be enforceable.
Do all the LSEs have to submit these IRPs on the same day?
Yes, all these CPUC LSEs will submit it. There's a different IRP process for the munis, which I think is a lighter touch than what the CPUC requires.
Okay. The bigger the LSE, the more complex this is. Is that true?
The requirements are substantially the same for all LSE types. The IOUs have a bit more that they have to do in the transmission sections as well as in the cost sections, but not a huge difference overall between LSE types. And if you're a CCA, it doesn't matter if you have 1,000 gigawatt hours a year or 10,000 gigawatt hours a year, your obligations are the same.
Do all CCAs or LSEs put the same effort into their IRP?
I don't know.
We are graded at the end, right?
That is true.
really?
Eventually, when
Not a joke.
Yeah.
Oh.
when they're
Oh, wow.
yeah, when they are accepted, each LSE does receive a grade on every single component.
As in A, B, C, D kind of thing? Or is-
It's meets expectations,
Okay,
exceeds,
okay,
or
okay.
you need to go back and rewrite
Okay.
something.
Okay.
And their Yelp reviews? Okay, 2024 was canceled. When was it canceled? Like, was it canceled at the last minute? How much effort did we put into 2024? Did they just say with lots of runway, we're not gonna do it?
Yeah, I don't know that we had lots of runway, but the way the process works on our end is that we can't do a lot of work until the CPUC releases things like the load
Assumptions.
forecast. So they never got to the point where they released the assumptions, so we didn't do a huge amount of work on it.
Okay, and then is this kind of a living document? The have or it just guides the process? The
Very good question.
procurement process?
So as Monica said, the IRP itself, this 2-year filing is, largely for compliance. But, in 2022, we had a much smaller team working on this. We've since hired Jessica, we hired another planner. So our intent is that once we get this compliance filing done, and I think there's some learnings we can take from that filing, we're going to have a much more robust, ongoing internal long-term planning function in the organization.
Can I add that is our ideal world? As a former planner for many, many years, that's our ideal world. What makes this complicated is when you do all this work and you get a procurement order, it has nothing to do with the work that you did for your organization. It's just one big procurement order and everybody takes a share regardless of what your needs are. So, because that's the opposite of planning. Well, the state's doing the planning, but they're not taking into consideration our planning.
Yeah, which is, by the way, why I say I don't think there's a huge risk of it being binding. Because I think the state at least acknowledges when they issue these procurement orders, it blows our plants out of the water, so.
Last question. Are the IRPs from all the LSEs publicly available?
Yeah, there are a few portions we can redact, like our reliability requirements, but fundamentally, we will see public information on what everyone submits.
We can include that in the June report too, the link to all the past filings.
Vaughn, do you have any questions? Oh, okay. All right, well, I have a couple. One is curtailment. How does it work and who makes the decisions?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah, I will maybe let Monica answer part of this about sort of the real way curtailment works. But from a modeling perspective, what happens in developing that clean system power tool is the CPUC makes an assumption about what they think the system resource build will look like. They then use a production cost model to dispatch that build out. And they take the curtailment numbers from that model and put them in the spreadsheet tool. if you look at the CPUC's view of what the system's gonna look like going forward, there's a lot of solar that they add to that model. So we've done a check to say, okay, if you take just our load share allocation of the CPUC system, how close are our results to that? And essentially, the CPUC is putting a lot more solar in than we think than we want for ourselves. And, anecdotally, I suspect a lot of LSCs will include less solar than the CPUC's view of the world. So what that ends up meaning is that, the system is likely to actually have less solar than the CPUC believes. A lot of that curtailment is coming because they're putting so much solar into their model. And so if that solar doesn't come to fruition, the curtailment numbers might come down. Now, I will also say, I believe there's some clauses in our own contracts that help mitigate curtailment. And then the final thing I'll note, which is a bit of an oddity we found in the Clean System Power Tool that we can't quite wrap our heads around, is that for whatever reason, if we were to put our hybrid resources into the model as standalone solar and standalone batteries, our curtailment number goes down, which doesn't make sense because you'd think with a hybrid resource, that would ensure that your solar would be charging your battery. So there's some just odd things happening with their modeling that we've started to uncover if we've looked into this further.
Yeah, I mean, I think from a more of an operational standpoint, a curtailment happens kind of under two different circumstances. One is called an economic curtailment, where the CalISO is sending a signal in the day-ahead market that there's going to be too much of a resource tomorrow than what demand needs, right? There'll be too much solar. And they can't export it anywhere. Everybody's already taken as much as they can. And so in that case, we work behind the scenes here with our scheduling coordinator to develop a bidding strategy, is what we call it, so that we say, hey, if prices go negative to a certain point, and we may want to go negative too, because we want to make sure that the energy gets produced and we get the renewable energy certificate. But if it goes below a certain negative price, then we're okay if you just curtail us. We won't run. Right, so we'll not generate energy for that hour. That's called an economic curtailment. And those happen a lot.
Yeah.
And they're quite normal. And then we have provisions in our contract to limit them as well, because at the end of the day, the developer wants us to produce because they get investment tax and production tax credits. And we have to make sure that we run, and we need the recs too. And then there's an operation or a system curtailment. That happens when physically the CalISO says we cannot add that much solar at this particular location because we don't have the transmission capacity to allow it to.
That's allocation?
No, that's called an operation or system.
Operational.
System curtailment. And those happen too, and they happen a lot in the spring when you get a lot of hydro resources and then you get a lot of sun. That happens quite often, and those are very locational based. It matters not on a system-wide basis, like an economic curtailment, but more at that particular location, I just can't get one more megawatt out. And so, and our contracts allow for some amount of that as well.
Okay,
So,
wow.
the curtailment, just for this, is not, and for the sake of it, is not a bad thing. Curtailment is just,
It's a management tool.
it's a management tool.
It's a management tool.
Yeah.
And it's basically an assumption they give you.
Yeah.
In this case.
But a lot of the reason that we went to this expanded regionalization market is so that we have more ability to export some of that clean energy so that it doesn't just not get generated, right? We can send it somewhere else.
The web is more complex.
Yeah.
Okay, got that. All right, and then I noticed that onshore wind seemed to kind of dip in the 2030s. There's one of these histograms.
Yeah, so the build out on and I should have laid this out up front, I'll make sure I do it at the board meeting. The build out in the graphic is annual additions. So a lot of the stuff that's coming online in the 2030s, it stays on the portfolio throughout the full horizon.
This is
It's-
just.
Yeah, and part of the reason why we see more hybrids and more solar at the tail end is because those are the contracts that we have rolling out of our portfolio. So a lot of that is to replace all of the hybrid and solar that's already in the portfolio.
Right. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of our questions. And I would see if there's any public comment.
Yes.
Okay.
So Mara, your presentations are always so clear. Really appreciate the thought and effort you put into organizing what it is that you say. 40 years ago, I worked for HP's computer manufacturing manager, and one of the problems we were having was marketing would always forecast more than they actually could sell. And manufacturing had to build to the forecast because we procured the parts about 3 months ahead of when we needed to deliver. And the life cycle of a computer back in those days was about 12 months. So you had to know what you were going to order, had to build it, and if you had excess parts, they probably would be of very little value because you wouldn't be using them in the next product. It's different time cycles than what you're dealing with. But what we came up with was essentially a bet between marketing and manufacturing. It's okay, if your forecasts are accurate enough, manufacturing will give you more money to do more marketing. If your forecasts are inaccurate past a certain level, marketing will give manufacturing money to offset the scrap. What happens nowadays is things like Kalshi, where you can bet on some definable outcome. So we could imagine having Kalshi say, here's the forecast. Who wants to bet that this will happen in 2030 or 2035? I'm guessing this room would say the CPUC forecast is too high, but a Kalshi market would let us quantify that. One of the things that gets talked about but not measured, as far as I know, is reliability. So, how reliable is the grid? How reliable was it last year? Is there reliability at the generation level? Or is it at the transmission level? Or is it both? And how is this looking in the future? Because clearly, when you're worried about reliability, you say we need more capacity. And just as in marketing, saying we're going to sell more than they actually sold, the person generating the forecast has a specific interest in which way it's wrong. And for marketing, I always want to be a little too high. Okay, so there's that. If we were measuring system reliability, how would public safety power shutoffs be included in that? Is that when you turn off the grid to save a county from burning down, is that unreliability or is that prudent management and it doesn't count against your score? So those are the kinds of things I would love to learn more about.
Okay, thank you. All right, do we have anybody online that can come?
No hands raised yet.
Okay, so I believe we need to have a voice vote. And do I have a?
If you could put the staff's recommendation
That's a
up.
good idea.
And I think I heard a suggestion, so just to be, in terms of process, because we don't meet in July, the intent was to bring this in its form right now in June to the full board. I'm assuming the same presentation with some adjustments.
Minor
based on-
adjustments.
Minor adjustments and taking into account the feedback. This is a very technical item, and we have a very full agenda in June on some other items too for the board. So there was a suggestion that we hold a perhaps special subset of the executive committee.
Or just an executive committee meeting in July, just to give you feedback. And I'm not saying that needs to be part of the motion. I'm making that suggestion to you and polling. If we don't get quorum, we don't get quorum. And, and so I'm not signing up the executive committee to say, yes, we need a July meeting to review this. But if you think it's valuable, I'll leave it to you.
I guess my question would be, an alternative is that we be informed after the break of what conclusion you came to. I mean, I don't think we're going to really change the transmission.
So that's a good point. So
That's true.
at the August meeting, at the August board meeting, we can put as on consent, just the report that we sent. So you'll see that, you'll be able to see that. The other thing I was gonna ask, and I haven't talked to Maren about this, but it's certainly something that we could do as well, is we could have a study session on the IRP before the June meeting. Before, again, I don't think we're gonna change anything.
No.
Okay, so then we will just bring it to the regular June.
I don't know,
board.
I think a study session is a good idea. What do other people, or briefings, what is easier?
Briefings, I'm gonna put Maren on the spot, on one-on-one briefings with board members, certainly 100% willing to do that on anything.
That's a lot So it's
Time.
a lot of your time is the.
I like talking about this stuff.
Oh.
Well, it would be board members presumably not including executive committee, so that would be.
Or
Well, it
If
could be,
you wanted to
it
have
could
a,
be,
if you wanted to
yeah.
have more.
I mean, I don't think everybody would go for it. Maybe you would have 5. But,
Yeah, that's true.
I do think this is just, this has so much fundamental information in how we function that people might want a briefing. So I think we should just offer
Okay.
briefings. I think that would be very
All right,
helpful.
we'll do that. We'll bring it to the regular agenda in June. And we'll also include for the August meeting what we filed.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. All right, so we have kind of a recommendation in addition to this.
If that's the case, I'll make the motion
True.
as set forth, staff's recommendation.
Second by Klein.
All in favor?
Aye.
Monica likes it too, that is always important. All right, so that passes.
Actually, I'm sorry. We can't do that.
We have one more.
We need to do a voice vote in,
Yes,
if Monica, and if
Oh, yes, we've
Yvonne
got,
can't, and if Yvonne is
Yeah, we need
offline
to-
right now.
I don't think
She's not online, but, okay, so we do need to note that
her absence.
she was absent for the vote.
Okay,
That's-
so-
I'm fine with that, I just wanna make sure.
All right, so
doing the
that,
right
Yes,
thing.
for the record, so 4 and 2 absences for that vote.
okay, yeah. And also, I would just like to comment too, that this was a very good presentation. It's just that it's an incredibly meaty topic. And so I want to thank you for that. And I also really think that it's wise, from a governance point of view, to be using this as a planning tool and to take this opportunity to, to figure out, and to plan and to do it very rigorously. And so, I personally really appreciate that. There's a lot of science and economics in everything we do. And you don't just get that through gut checks. You need to do a lot of analysis, and that's what you've done. So I personally really appreciate that. Okay, you did 5, I'll set off 6.
Zipping right along.
Recommend the Silicon Valley Board of Directors approve the financial levers framework. And I imagine Justin. It's you, there you are. Hi, Justin, welcome.
Hello. Yeah, it's always difficult to go after Maren because both she does a really good job and because it's always a complicated, really interesting topic. And so I'm going to turn the page here for a moment. We're on a different topic. So whatever you have to do, take a deep breath, give it a little shake, get your mind into a different non-IRP location, which is
I'm gonna get some water.
get some water. That's a great thing as well. So the financial levers is something we've talked about a couple times. You saw it last in February, I guess, February. There's not a ton of new content here, and most of the conversation that we have been having internally since then has really been about how do we take the conversation we've been having and translate it into something that is sort of actionable, is usable, something concrete, given the uncertainties that exist, given the kind of time horizons that we're talking about. So that's what we're gonna go through today. I'm gonna do just a very quick recap. I'm gonna run through those slides, but we can always come back to them. They're there for reference. Talk about the recommendation that we've put together, and then spend a little bit of time on saying, what does it mean? What does this recommendation actually look like? How will we use it in the future? Because I think that's the key bit. So for the recap, we talked about our mission. We all know our mission, and we also looked at our emissions for the region across the sectors that we track over time, which is that bar chart on the bottom left, showing our base year of 2015, and then where things are today. So you can kind of see that the trend that we are on, and electricity sector emissions are that bottom category, and then we have buildings and transportation as the upper two. You can see the COVID impact, especially on transportation emissions. And then we talked about the customer-facing value proposition. So this is both what we want our customers to see as in terms of value of SVCE, and also what we know they do see as the value of SVCE from surveys and conversations with them. We talked about who our customers are. I know, the vast majority of our accounts are residential customer accounts, but in terms of our overall load, it's majority is in fact non-residential. We talked about that. We also looked at the bill trend over time, which is the chart on the right. The top gray line is showing the overall bill and the overall rate, and then the number above it is the kind of average residential monthly bill at that rate. And then what's the constituent pieces of that, which is to say generation hasn't really changed it's had some variation, but we've kind of ended up at the same place as 2019. But the T&D, which SVCE does not have the same influence over, has grown a lot. And then we looked at our costs, our revenues, and kind of what makes that up. The bulk of our costs are the base supply costs, which are things we just have to procure in order to serve our load. We have operating expenses, program spend, and our voluntary clean piece. So we talked about that, as well as prepay savings, other income. We also mentioned operating expenses, and so we wanted to flesh that out just a little bit more to say, our non-supply, non-program operating expenses represent about 10% of our budget, which is 1 cent per kilowatt hour. They break out in this way, and it's important to note that some of these things are non-discretionary. It kind of depends how you define that, but we have to do certain mailings. We have to interface with the billing system in order to operate. Some of these costs are inescapable. But this is something that we're always looking at, is how do we run efficiently and make sure that we're finding those opportunities for cost reductions. And that's something we're going to be doing and continue doing kind of no matter what we do with the financial levers, including prepay. And so prepay is something that we usually show as a power supply savings, but it's also a very significant savings, as you saw on the previous slide. It's about 0.5 cent per kilowatt hour right now. So we'll continue to explore opportunities there. We talked about the levers, so I'm just going to recap our 3 main levers that we've been talking about. So currently we have a clean target, which includes covering the losses. It's very important to our mission of reducing carbon in our for our region. It's part of our core role as an LSC. As we talked about, there's a small, long-term financial impact to changing this from our current target, just because we have other requirements. Maren went through the IRP, and there's constraints there as well in terms of how much less clean we could even go if we wanted to. And I think, ideally, we would not want to adjust this. This is the feedback we heard from the board. We talked about programs. So there's kind of 2 numbers to know with programs. There's the amount that we allocate each year from the budget, and then there's the amount we actually expect to spend each year from the reserves. And that's when it actually shows up as coming out of our kind of days cash on hand number. So those are different numbers because over the years, the board has allocated in certain years significantly more money to programs. So we're kind of in the process now of spending down that reserve total. Also important to our mission, something that we are filling a really big role locally. Also on a long-term basis, this is not something that will have a major impact on the financial position. And then I do want to connect this to the integrated decarb plan work that we've been doing with Zoe and talking through. That's kind of what we fund and the way we think about the portfolio of things to fund. This is a conversation about how much do you fund it. That's kind of what we're using the financial levers to do. And then also, feedback that in an ideal world, we don't want to adjust this if we don't have to. And then rates lever, currently at a 1% discount that's varied over the years. We've talked, and this is important, this is not significantly driving affordability benefits for our customers. Certainly we have driven large bill savings over the lifetime of our operation for our customers, but from a affordability standpoint, we're 1% on 20% of the bill. And so it's not a huge number there. The Carefera discount is something that does provide more targeted affordability support, because that's more like $12 a month rather than, let's say half a dollar per month. And it's also very important for competitiveness, because that's more the comparison to PG&E and thinking through that, and both for res and for non-res and how we think about that. This does have the biggest opportunity for an ongoing financial impact, but also ideally we don't want to adjust that if we don't have to. So that's sort of a theme with all of it. It's all as needed. We also talked about the split product offerings idea. And so if I put up here, this is kind of what our current status looks like. Most of our customer accounts are on Green Start, which it has an RPS target is clean, or 106% clean now. at this discount to PG&E. We have Green Prime, where there's customers choose to pay a premium to be 100% renewable. And then we have our Green Prime Direct for some of our large commercial customers, which is a non-standard pricing option, but still has to cover costs, still has to be clean, and includes a term. And this split product concept would move towards, maybe an opt-down option where it would remain at a discount to PG&E to start, but would have to be then less clean and maybe would not be eligible for programs as a way to kind of make the cost difference make sense. So what has changed since we last discussed this? Quite a few things. The maybe main one is our financial forecast, and this is always changing because every week you can get a new financial forecast. But the mid-year estimate, we were still forecasting for this fiscal year that we would be seeing a negative change in our net position over the course of the year. And our current estimate now is that that's going to be a slightly positive overall. So when we kicked this conversation off back in December, we thought, okay, FY26 it's going to be somewhat negative, and then 27 is going to be very negative. That's changed a little bit. FY26 is now a tiny bit positive in the forecast. And FY27 has gotten a little bit worse. And those are related in some ways. There's kind of some improvement you get that then you have to give back and things like that. And Amrit will be going more into that in the some of the financial stuff, and he has covered that in the past. So this is a big one though. Other things have also changed. This is the list on the left. There's new proceedings about rate design at the state level. There's large load legislation. We've got the updated IRP runs that Maren just went through, which have new constraints that we're learning about, what emissions we can and can't have in our portfolio. We've got our credit rating improvement, which is great. Integrated decarb plan discussions we already talked about, and yes, continuing to look for operating expenses. So this is our new base case, which I didn't include the previous base case. It sort of doesn't matter. This is just kind of what our flow looks like right now for the forecast. And so you can see where we are today and where we're headed. Okay, so what does it mean? What is the recommendation that we actually get to here? I'll talk through this and then we'll get into like how would this actually get used, which I think will help explain it. So cost savings, efficiencies, we've talked about that. The kind of current position would be to maintain our current levels of clean programs and rate discount at a minimum. If we have an opportunity to do more, we would, but this is kind of where we will stay right now. If needed, we would introduce the split product offerings. And that's an important step because especially as a first step where we have one product that is lower than PG&E, the discount to PG&E, because that will help us assess opt-out risks if in the future we had to, let's say, increase rates above PG&E for all customers. This would allow us to first get some real world information on who would want to opt down. We would still keep a clean program participation product, but that might have to be at a small premium to PG&E. And then over time, we would revisit that. And if the forecast continues as it currently is, we would scale up the price for those products over time, again, if needed. And we would incorporate some reduction in programs as well in order to capture kind of the feedback we got from the board, which is we want to take a balanced approach and kind of touch on all of these things. So this would be touching on rates, supply, and programs in slightly different ways, but acknowledging that the main driver, the main opportunity for us really on the cost recovery side is the rate setting. And then the plan that we would ask you to direct staff to work towards for planning purposes would be to kind of remain where we are, which is to say a 1% discount, the current program spend, the current clean targets for 2026 and 2027. So that would give us, the certainty, well, not certainty, because this can always change and what would happen. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, okay, how will it work? That's what I'm getting into. It will work by saying we get the playbook approved, which really reflects the priorities between these different levers. As we're doing today, we monitor the financial situation in the forecasts. We bring budgets to the board. We talk about that. And in all of those future budget decisions, we would propose changes based on this playbook. So this would tell us what we would kind of be proposing to the board, as well as some other alternatives that we would put out there if needed. And so if we felt that the way the forecast was going told us that we needed to start making one of these changes, we would bring that to the board and have that conversation then. But this would be the change we make. And then the integrated decarb plan would really influence the program portfolio piece of this. So don't look at the stuff on the right, just look at the graph on the right, or don't look at stuff on the left, look at the graph on the right, excuse me.
Don't look.
Don't look at
Close
anything
your
else.
eyes.
So on the right, you can see, I've shown the base case, it's the same base case. And this is an example forecast of how we might use the playbook in the future. So we would say, okay, for 2026, 2027, we're continuing as is. As we head into FY28, we would come to the board and we'd say, okay, the forecast is still looking like we thought. Here's where our current days cash on hand are. We think we need to take the first step from the playbook, which is to create a split product. And let's say we set it at a 4% premium. We have an opt-down product as well, a small program spend reduction. And we do that for a year. We look at where we stand. We would come back to the board again as part of the next year budget and say, okay, here's what we learned. Here's what we're seeing. We are going to adjust that again. And in this scenario, I said we raise the premiums up to kind of try to keep us closer to that 300.
Notice what our policy on cash on hand is. I know we have
Yes,
some specific numbers.
our minimum is 120, our maximum is,
Maybe go back to one of the first slides. I think you had it in there.
I think that's right.
Oh,
You had the
That's right.
ranges.
And the maximum is like 350 or something like that.
maximum is 500.
Oh, maximum is like
We're exceeding the
But
maximum.
yes, but and Amrit would want me to make sure I said, this is including unspent program dollars and our thresholds are when you take those out. So this is a little apples to oranges.
So that's about 100 days or
Yeah,
something
roughly
like that.
100 days.
Oh, there we are. Thank you.
Okay. So this is just showing, this is how we would use it. We would still have these conversations with the board, but we would know that this is kind of in our back pocket. It's the playbook that we think we would follow. And it shows you how it kind of keeps us from going as low on the days cash on hand. It's like a way that we know we would take some of these actions, and it lets us think about and model this while still preserving the board's ability to actually, in the moment, make those decisions, have that conversation. A different version of that might be, in 2027, rather than saying, yes, let's continue as is, the board might say, you know what, we'd like to take that action a little bit earlier. And we could, and we would do that. And then maybe in FY28, we say, we're doing a little bit better. And actually, we don't think we need to take more aggressive action yet. So we'll just stay at that level rather than raising the premiums at that time. And maybe that ends us up in a different place. So it's just trying to give you a sense for, at each decision point, we could make different decisions that would lead to different forecasts, but it's all kind of based on this same playbook, the same structure. Then I wanted to give you an example of a world where the base case changes. So actually the financial forecast, let's say, improves. Again, we would make decisions each year because that's when we have to make decisions for the upcoming fiscal year. But we would adjust based on what the actual forecast shows us. Okay, so recommendation, I'm not going to say it again. This is what the pieces are. This is what we're kind of wanting to bring to the board. This is where we are on the timeline. We've had several conversations about it. This is the period where we're looking for the final decisions on this approach. But again, the actual actions and sort of adoption of some of these things won't happen until each year during the budgeting process. So this just gives us the playbook, gives us the sort of structure for some of those proposals and the alternatives that we discussed. Okay.
All right. Martina's all done.
So I just want to be clear that so this is the playbook. Anything from the playbook could be used at any time. Doesn't have to necessarily go in the order that, in any particular order.
Yes, I
Okay.
think that's true, yeah.
Okay.
But we would, whatever we propose, we would come back to the board for actual
Yes.
approval.
Right,
Yes.
I understand that. I just want to make sure.
Excuse me. Do other CCAs have similar playbooks, or are they just playing it?
I have not seen a playbook, but I have not done a rigorous look for playbooks. I have looked at other CCAs in terms of what they are doing, and I will say there's sort of a spread of some CCAs that are clearly trying to stay a tiny bit below PG&E for as long as they can, or their incumbent utility, let's say, because I look across the state. There are some CCAs that don't really directly compare in the way that we do, rate plus PCIA. They don't look at that in the same way, and they set their rate based on, here's what our costs are, here's what we think we want to pass through. And so some of them end up being in some years way below PG&E and in some years way above PG&E. And so right now, some of them look, 30-40% above PG&E. So I would say, I'm sure they have similar conversations to this. I don't know that there's a playbook in quite the way that we have teed it up.
Regarding the slide that you had that said, here's where the rate adjustment could be and where the X is on that scale.
Mhm.
I'd be over on the right-hand side. I think it's very important for us to be the same or 1% lower than PG&E. I mean, and when you had the slide of our customer mix, it's almost a third of its on that pie chart.
Mm-hmm.
I think the stickiness or the elasticity of demand is residential customers, the cost of switching and the effort to switch may be too difficult for them. So they're more sticky if you increase the rates or decrease the discount or go to a premium. But I think those small businesses are way more, their elasticity is a lot more. So, but I think it's great to have a playbook, but I wouldn't have it as an algorithm. But these are the things there's no surprises to the board if you say, hey, conditions are changing, we're gonna do this and make these changes. So I think I very much support it.
We do not use AI here. No AI, only real
He
intelligence.
said algorithm. But I will say, I think that it's important to acknowledge that, yes, I think there is a concern and a question around elasticity and customer departure. And I think that's why what I would propose and what's in this playbook would be that any first step would be always to have a split product where one of the products is below PG&E so that we can understand more what the opt-downs might look like. But it's also important to say that, long term, if our costs go up and we have to, then we may have to do that. Like the rate setting is the only lever that's significant enough to drive that.
And then I understand. It wasn't clear to me about our use of our GASB 62 reserve, whatever that is. I can't remember the details, but we've got a reserve in there.
Yes, I've asked Amr about that, and it's reflected in that days cash on hand drawdown.
Okay, but we're gonna be chewing into that.
I think he's gonna bring that as part of the fiscal year 27 budget.
Okay.
We have a drawdown
Yeah.
based on an expected of 123 million, so ask for that.
Okay.
Mine will kind of tag on, so I'm looking at the split product offerings. So in some senses, it sounds like you want to pilot or get a better feel for how much rate changes drive people. So create the new opt-down edit. Well, all right, let me rephrase, but I'm sort of trying to figure out how this all works together, because in reality, whether we're 1% discount to PG&E or a parity, or even a little bit higher, there's minuscule savings or minuscule difference on the bill to at least the residential customers, right? We've talked about each 1% is how many cents? It's not a lot of difference on the bill. So are we trying to determine, to me, is it a psychological concept to be less than or no more than PG&E when it's in reality not, if you offered somebody a savings of 25 cents, even the lowest income customers, I'm not sure what that is. So are you trying to test if the psychology of is maybe more important than the financial, and maybe my premise is wrong, because I understand the importance of being able to say no more or less than PG&E. But if in reality, it's just academic. So explain that to me. I don't know, I can't explain it well because I'm kind of struggling with the, yeah.
So I think, I know what you're asking, but I'm just gonna say this first part too, which is, I don't think we, or the direction we have from the board, I don't think anyone wants necessarily to go down any of
No,
these
of course,
pathways.
yes, right,
It's a question of when and if needed, then
Right.
what do we do? And I think, to me, this feels like the most reasonable first step, which is, yes, to say, okay, we want to retain all the customers as a starting point. And so, like for
they
this
have-
first stage, and so
they
let's
have different
create.
importance levels,
Yeah, and so
right?
so we've asked them, we've done surveys, we get some
Yes.
information, but also we look at other CCAs that have been higher and been lower. We look at the opt-outs there, and they don't necessarily align with what people say on the surveys they would do. They say,
Right.
oh, I'm not gonna pay more than this, but then in
No,
reality,
right,
to save 50 cents, are you gonna go through the process? You're probably not. Non-residential customers, it's a similar question, like how will they actually respond? So if we have to do this, I think creating that will, yes, it will let us essentially test, rather than
Right.
opt out, let's have you opt down.
Okay,
And so then,
so you give that option, you can sort of measure, try to gauge what's actually driving it. So then the other question is, the program in eligibility, if you went with one of this opt-down, have you modeled, I mean, so if I'm following, and again, most customers are not gonna be sophisticated enough to look at it this way, but they can bulk up on their programs one year and then opt down the next, because they don't care if they're ineligible
we
for
do have
programs.
terms in our programs that require
Okay.
that you, so we would likely do is say something to the effect of you have to kind of maintain your certain level. of
Okay,
this.
all right, so
Yeah,
you're sort of managing for that, okay,
Yeah, that would be a piece of the implementation.
Yeah. all right.
I was just wondering about the Green Prime Direct program and how popular that is.
It's something that we discuss with some of the largest customers, and we certainly have, the one deal that we can't talk about is with Google, that we've put out there, and there's some information around that. But the specific amount of load and pieces there, there's only so much we can share because it's specific to certain customers,
It's confidential, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe I will add that, another thing that we could add to the playbook, or that we may consider bringing to the board at some point, is those larger customers, even if we don't put them on a custom contract, there's a desire by some of them to be on what's called a pass-through rate or index rate, where they have exposure to the wholesale market, as opposed to a standard rate like we offer under Green Start or Green Prime. That changes the economics of it slightly, but it also, more importantly, reduces the risk that we hold. Because right now, when we offer a customer a standard rate, it's almost a fixed rate for a year. And sometimes it has no bearing on what happens in the market and what happens with our costs. We guarantee that we're gonna give them that rate. On a pass-through rate, they bear the benefits and the risks of being exposed. And some of these large customers like that. That's what they want. And because they can have the ability to hedge that on their own, either by securing their own clean resources, which many of them do, or by even working with vendors in the market to buy products to hedge their costs. So they like that. That's something that we're looking at as well.
So there is interest, and to Monica's point, the playbook isn't a limit on the things we will explore. It's a sort of a foundation of the things that we will explore. So we're gonna keep looking into how we can expand that.
Several questions. First, from a Green Prime standpoint, how many of those are residential customers versus small business? And we'll leave off all the large commercial. Let's just focus on the small business portion. Do we have an idea, a feel for that standpoint, from a Green Prime standpoint?
I don't have the numbers in front of me, but to pull that together,
that would be useful. And also, being on Green Prime, what does that cost a standard residential customer?
It's about $0.74
cents.
Per kilowatt hour.
What?
Oh, for like times.
No, it's listed on the, but
Yeah.
how much, what does it cost per month, just in?
So that'd
on average?
be $4, if that's 500 kilowatt hours
Okay.
times. Yeah.
Just trying to get a number that I can
Yeah.
grab onto.
0.47 cents per kilowatt.
I know. Yes, and let me go through my bill and figure out what that is.
I think from a number, I think the majority of the, and I could be wrong, is the participation is from city agencies, member agencies.
Okay,
They're the biggest participants on green.
so that's, so
That initially,
from a playbook standpoint, and Sunnyvale was good about doing our playbooks for, especially for like a climate action plan. Forget about the plan. What's the plays and what's going to be a yearly play and all that. I would love to see, and this isn't tied to any conceivable action from a decision from a board, but from an operational standpoint, the marketing of Green Prime to customers, because it's ultimately this is changing. And before we would, to me, the split, and we already have a split. We have Green Start and we have Green Prime. And the concept of saying, okay, we'll make slightly dirtier delivery for if you want to go cheaper, it's not as going to be as completely clean. Before we get to that portion of the playbook, and I don't know what unclean, how much clean is unclean is the whole other thing. It's marketing the Green Prime in a slightly different way. And so to me, trying to increase our revenue stream of how many of the existing 98% can we switch to Green Prime to say, this is $4 a month, but it's not just $4 a month you're paying. It's look, Campbell, we gave you an HVAC system. It's focusing on the program and tying it directly to the programs in each of our cities, I think has value. That it's like you are decarbonizing. Yes, you're paying extra. You're getting clean and slightly cleaner, focusing on what you're doing. It's not just, well, it's clean energy, but you're making a difference in your local community. And so it's tying those two things together. And not that there's a one-for-one operation, but the programs that we're paying, so the savings that we currently do, and it's built up through reserves, we're focusing into programs. Those programs are decarbonizing our community. For those people in our community that are very environmental focused, I'm committed to doing that. And to me, that's something that could be done in the interim before we actually hit the playbook. And to me, it's playbook action 1. Nothing changes except for how we market Green Prime to I'll say a residential community especially. And I understand that's only 30% of our portfolio or whatever, but increasing that revenue and conceivably pushing the small business to that has value.
I'll have to think a little bit more about that, but I just to say, the reason that it's higher on Green Prime is that we're having to cover their full position with RPS eligible resources. And so that cost is entirely going to cover, so it's not actually, it doesn't affect the revenue. It's just,
Oh,
it doesn't affect the net
okay.
revenue. It's,
It doesn't
our
affect
costs
the
go
net.
up and we charge them those costs. And
Got
so, but I think what you're getting at is, and I think this is consistent, I just didn't put it this way, is like, the clean product, we could frame it in the positive, which is to say, this is the one where you're getting the programs, you're helping support this, you're 100% clean. Like,
so for me, creating another split
Mhm.
on top of Green Start right now. Green Start champion. I'm a champion for energy. So it's basically the same capability, but as Green Start, but I am going to pay more. I'm going to pay whatever, and let staff figure that out. To me, that's something that we could implement in the short term to increase our revenues and focus on those that want to make
More contribution.
more contribution to what our goals are, and especially tying it to the HVAC units on Vargas Elementary, the solar, those sorts of things that I want to make a difference. And yes, we're already looking from a program standpoint to do these decarbonization efforts, but it's one step before. To me, it's increasing the revenue coming in before we have to make these harder decisions. And thank you for clarifying green prime, because I always think it's like, oh, it's a pass through, and it's costing us more to be that, for that premium.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
just to be clear, we're
Yeah.
not subsidizing Green Prime. Green Prime
No.
will collect sufficient revenue on the premium
Yes.
to cover the incremental cost.
Right.
We only have it there because we have some cities that really want it.
Yeah.
And we have a couple of large customers who need it for some.
For their
LEED
goals
for
and
the
their,
LEED certification.
yeah, right, right.
But otherwise, it's a product that really doesn't, from a clean perspective, doesn't change our emissions at all. Whether, because all it is it's more solar versus some large hydro or nuclear,
Okay.
quite frankly, and they're both clean.
Okay.
So,
But yeah, this is a great example of a thing that we could do outside of the playbook. I mean, and we could look into some of those things that we could do it sooner. And-
Right, but
Yeah,
to
but I
me,
like that
but to me, it's
great
also
start,
part of the, it's part of the
Yeah,
playbook.
well, it gets us ahead of the playbook.
Right, and it's trying to do what the organization's goal is.
Right.
And, you know, it's like, and conceivably it then becomes a portion of that playbook of, okay, Green Start goes to, and we talked about this, a year ago, we were talking about 0.5% versus 1%. It's like Green Start gets a little bit closer to PG&E, but, and maybe, you know, the green champion now is $3, you know, $2 a month going to $4 a month. And, you know, for those that, you know, love their solar panels, it's like, oh, I'll pay a little bit more to better the district. So I'll get off my soapbox. I'm sorry, I've talked for way too long.
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, coming from an environmental organization point of view, people are always asking environmental organizations, what can I do to make a difference? And this is a little thing that people could do, that a lot of people come forward. So, or could conceive, so I can imagine Actera, for instance, sending out in a newsletter that, you know, Silicon Valley Clean Energy has this new program, and this is a way, you know, with a very small cost that you can make a little bit of a difference. So I know, you know, the Sierra Club in Mountain View has something like 3,500 people, right? You know, over 3,500 people voters who get their newsletter. So, you know, getting in, connecting to those environmental organizations it's not nothing, yeah. It's meaningful. Okay, so is this an action?
Yes.
This is an action, okay. So that
They're
means
all
we have public
actions.
comment. Public comment. Is there any public comment on this?
There is. 6
Great.
things I'd like to try to cram into 3 minutes.
Okay,
So a couple of years ago, Green Prime's premium did not cover its additional costs. I don't know if that's still true, but it was true a couple of years ago. But please, if we're going to promote this, let's make sure that the costs are fully covered. On Tuesday at 5 o'clock, Mountain View is going to be having a council study session on their 5-year greenhouse gas reduction plan. And it doesn't even mention the fact that SVC Energy is carbon free because it assumes it. So if you become not carbon free in the next 5 years, you'll blow up their plan. Please don't do that. There are about 25 CCAs in California who've been operating for about 10 years. So there's about 250 times when a CCA has either been above or below PG&E's price. And I know that there are at least 5, probably more like 15 agency years when they've gone above. And it would be therefore studyable by looking at historical data to see what happened in commercial and residential opt-outs or opt-downs. Sounds like a great project for Cal CCA to take on behalf of all of its members. What are the goals that other CCAs have for days of cash on hand? Are their CFOs as concerned as Amrit is that we have, a Brinks truck sitting right outside, ready to load the cash anytime we need it? I believe that you'll find that you're pretty well at the top of the range of days of cash on hand, and your minimum threshold may also be above your peers. I think reducing program spend is a sensible thing to do if cash is running short, but I encourage you to do it in this way. say, as of December 31st, we're cutting the rebate for XYZ by 50%. Hurry, hurry, hurry. You know, do the thing before December 31st. We saw with the $7,500 EV rebate, it just spiked demand. We've seen similar things in the 10-year step down of the Million Solar Roofs program. So don't just fail to announce it, blast it out, make people very aware of it. I would love to know what the internal forecasts are for how PCIA will change, how PG&E's prices will change, and how PG&E's greenhouse gas emissions will change compared to SVCE's over the planning horizon. I just can't believe the PCA hasn't disappeared yet. I've made this point before, but I'd love to know what you all think is going to happen to this very important number.
Okay, thank you. That was 6, Bruce. Got it. All right. Is there anyone online with public comment? Okay. All right. So I will bring it back to the committee for a recommendation and a vote.
And before I do that, I did want to bring up one other thing. Conceivably adding to your playbook. So we created this new green champion option. But conceivably, cities could on their own make a motion to opt in all the residents of a city to a specific threshold. And it's something to have a discussion, because doing this as an organization to say has a certain amount of issue that we will have certain cities that are very cost sensitive, and conceivably we would have pitchforks and torches at our meetings because you raised it, and even my board member isn't representing my interest, and having a split board, not knowing where that decision would go. The concept that a city, and talk in discussions with Monica, a city on its own could say, I'm moving all of my residents to Green Champion. Whether or not the council would be up for that, that's a whole other decision from a city standpoint. But that is an option to the playbook as far as creating this next level. But I'll leave it at that from a consideration standpoint. As far as a recommendation, I go with staff's recommendation. I'll just leave it at that. With taking in the comments that this board, the executive committee gave.
Got a motion?
That is a motion.
I'll second. Okay, so we have a motion by Klein and a second by Martinez Beltran, and I think it's time for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. So now we move on to item 7. Recommend the board of directors approve an allocation of $700,000 of program fund dollars to extend the Go Electric Advisor program, and authorize the CEO to execute an amendment with the Sacramento Municipal Utility District to extend the term through June 2028 and set a new not to exceed amount of $1.542 million. Okay.
All right, we'll just jump into this about our proposal. So we'll talk a bit about the program and what we. Oh, sorry, I'm Jessamine Allen. I'm a program lead with our programs team on the customer success program.
Yeah.
And I oversee our Go Electric Advisor program. So I'll give a bit of background of what that service is, how customers have responded, and what we're proposing to the board. So kind of very simply, our goal through this service is to help answer the customer's question, how do I electrify my, and you can fill in the blank. Because while there are kind of standard appliances that, we recommend, heat water heaters, each customer's journey does look a bit different in terms of what it costs to them, who they work with, what types of equipment they use. And so this program provides, we do this by providing white glove assistance. We have a phone hotline. There are also web channels. People can contact us. And basically it's meant to be a comprehensive service where we can answer just general questions about SVCE, our programs, what is electrification, but go in, we provide a lot of information about incentive availability, electrification planning if there's kind of a larger plan in mind. And then very importantly, we try to refer customers to any other complementary resource that they might be available for, whether that's an SVCE program or sometimes maybe an external program that they can also leverage. And this advisor service kind of since launch has really been kind of had even kind of greater use just because our program offering has really expanded since we launched. And so, initially we've primarily focused on home rebates. In the past few years, now we have direct install programs, various tools. And so these advisors kind of listen to the customer and can help help them navigate our program offering and find out which service supports their needs. So in terms of timeline of this program, we originally launched in December 2023. We were working with SMUD as the implementer. We're nearing the end of the current contract, which ends in August. And what we're going to be discussing today is this proposal to extend so that the contract reaches kind of a full 5-year length, and the service would tentatively, be scheduled to end in June 2028. So this is a kind of screenshot of the web page. I just want to emphasize the SMUD staff behind this program do provide live support. So that's kind of live web chat. There's a call center that can take phone calls. And then there's also prompt email response timelines if customers want to communicate that way. And we've seen strong uptake from customers, approximately 3,500 as of the last month. And so we're consistently kind of seeing these numbers kind of increase and stabilize as the service becomes kind of more well-known amongst customers. We have a system set up so we can track, we try to link the customers calling in and contacting us to their customer account record. That allows us to see kind of where customers are calling from. It also allows us to track what topics were discussed, and this is also really key for our evaluation so that we can see, what customers are contacting the service, and then if they're participating in our other programs. We also, while these numbers are strong, we also didn't, when we set up this program, we didn't know what to expect. We did make some forecasts, and I'm happy to say we've seen stronger numbers than we forecasted, particularly in kind of years 2 and 3. Year 3, we're only partially the way through, but we expect to exceed that kind of initial target. And so, we expect to see these numbers continue or even grow as we continue the service. So in terms of the kind of common customer inquiries we get, maybe no surprise, the top 3 bolded ones are kind of the most common inquiries, probably about 75 to 80%. Incentive layering, kind of what rebates are available, how do programs work is the main driver of kind of outreach. Also kind of project costs, whether, the impacts to bill, and also just kind of generally, how do I navigate a home upgrade? And so that's providing some information on what the permitting looks like, finding contractors, pointing to people to our, contractor lists and whatnot. And so we do connect with the kind of implementers to understand kind of what customers are calling in, what are the common questions, maybe what are some of the unique. So I just included some of these examples because we get a really wide range of inquiries coming in. And I do want to actually highlight one customer use case that I thought was great. This was a customer who is income qualified, wanted to go electric, but was also aware they have a 125 amp panel, which is totally doable, but a lot of contractors and others will tell you can't. And so they contacted our service, who did a virtual energy audit to kind of understand about the home, which turned into a more complete electrification plan, kind of mapping out how the whole home could go electric, including devices like circuit splitters, which help keep them on that 125 amp existing service. The customer then went through our rebate programs for water heater, HVAC, induction, EV charging, all on the 125 amp. And then they not only maximized SVCE's income qualified incentives, they were also supported in accessing some of the state income qualified incentives, and also came back to the advisors to review the contractor bids that they received. So this was an example of a customer really kind of using the full suite of services provided by the Go Electric Advisor. So in terms of kind of what we thought this program could offer to customers and how people would respond, I've shared that incentive layering systems has been really popular, kind of understanding what incentives are available when. We also direct customers to our resources on bill impacts, contractor lists. The service has been very highly ranked. We see kind of lower use of maybe the technical assistance in whole home electrification planning than we first thought. I think the learning there is that, if customers are in a project and they're coming up against, something technical, they consult with their contractor. So we just see fewer inquiries like that. And on the whole home electrification, we see this in our rebate programs. People typically do one appliance at a time, maybe two. So we think there needs to be a bit more time for that kind of mindset, maybe to shift that, you can start with a plan and think kind of comprehensively about whole home electrification. So now I'll kind of discuss this plan for extension. Basically, we do see a continued need for these types of advisory services. There's a lot of uncertain, there's some changes in the Air District implementation timeline, but we still think this live resources has been kind of cited in these proceedings as a valuable customer resource, both to understand what resources are available to them, but also how the rules might impact them and and the equipment in their home. We've also heard from several member agencies that they routinely refer customers to the service. We see uptake across our service territory. And just generally, like I said, incentives, how to access rebates is one of our big inquiries. So having this service while we continue to offer our home rebates and other programs, really makes sense. And so what we've kind of done so far, so that's under the kind of current timeline, and then our extension proposal. Our original allocation towards this was on the order of $892,000, which will take us to approximately, August 2026. For this extension, we're proposing to add $700,000 of program funding. $650,000 of that would go into increase the SMUD contract NTE that covers all of those customer support, any admin, and some of the database management or migration costs. And then also just $50,000 remains with SVCE for contingency to cover, give us some flexibility to cover additional costs. And then, so this would bring the service until June 2028 for kind of a 60-month timeline contract. And I did want to share, we did discuss alternatives, among staff, looking at ways to potentially reduce costs. What would that change in the quality of service? So the main takeaway is I do want to share, we did weigh different options, and we just, in the end, we came away, moving away from the current service and the current model would be significant trade-offs. In terms of, the continuity of the service, because there may require pause to start up if we worked with a different vendor or maybe try to move it in-house. Also, we have all of the kind of program infrastructure, resources, call center live. And so there would be, significant cost to just kind of restart and move away from SMUD. So for the time, for this extension, we propose continuing to work with SMUD. And like I said, it's also, a very well-received service that provides the support we're looking for. So the action for today, we're requesting that you recommend the board approve an allocation of $700,000 to our program funds, and then execute this, allow the CEO to execute the amendment, just to continue this program through June 2028. And the last thing I'll say in terms of next steps, we would take this to the June board meeting on consent with the amendment, and then execute that amendment as soon as possible afterwards. And this would allow the service continue kind of uninterrupted through June 2028. And we have some different plans about what we'll do over the next kind of year or two, iterate and improve the service. But we can share updates as that happens.
Okay, questions?
Yes, so love the program, happy to see that it's being extended. I think it's exactly that. It's trying to help walk people through the value and where they can get rebates. From the contract with SMUD, I was actually a little surprised looking at the document. Of the 650, 180 of that are website and Salesforce administration.
Yeah, so that's the maximum amount. And we're looking, that includes some additional kind of wiggle room within that kind of amount. Basically, at this point, they need, I don't think we included, it's in the amendment itself, but it's around $5,000 a month for that kind of system support, troubleshooting, data integration. So what we're doing, which are costs we didn't have before, these are kind of new as part of the extension. So we've already been looking at quotes because now we have our own Salesforce system. We didn't.
It's like we're redoing the website. We're doing our website, and is this their website support? Is this them syncing to our website?
Yeah, so they
I'm trying to get that
currently
idea.
own and maintain the website because again, we didn't have some of the resources in-house when this launched. But because of these costs that we didn't, have in the initial phase, we're looking at this migration so that we own and maintain the resources, use our own Salesforce system now that we have one, and that will reduce any of that kind of Salesforce and admin spend. And that would be either go unused or be allocated towards, customer support.
Okay, and
So
that was my big question, because it seemed like this was duplication of work,
Yeah.
and it was about almost a third, or no, 20% of what SMUD is getting.
Yes.
We're already doing in other ways. Okay, so you're on top of that. I'm fine with staff recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask too, so over the 5-year contract, it seemed like that was what, the 650, was it 650 something?
Mhm.
And then for the additional 2 years, it was 700. Why? I would think that it would be less because it's a shorter time period than the 5 years.
Yeah, so the original allocation, 900,000, that did include, it was almost a couple $100,000 of startup costs. So when we were designing, there's a lot of training, onboarding, building out all the resources. And then, not quite 3 years of service under that original. And then the extension is 700,000. And that includes, a significant portion that's set aside for this kind of Salesforce that we're looking to minimize, reduce those costs, but about 450 of that will go towards kind of the customer support costs.
It's 3 years, not 5 for the first.
Yeah, the first one is about.
But it's pretty significant. I mean, if you look here, so I was just trying to understand.
But if you look at the customer contacts, you're actually increasing the customer contacts over the 2 years.
Yeah, there's
from
no
what you had
argument that
already,
it's
so.
absolutely working. I'm just wondering why, there was such a difference in the cost there, but.
Well, that's fine. So it costs you, each customer contact costs you. And so if you're delivering
Yes,
even
it's
more,
correct.
so. Anyway, I should let you answer.
Oh.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So, okay, and so how much was included with the startup costs?
So the 892,000, the original allocation, was on the order of, I want to say about $200,000 kind of in startup because there was a lot of design work, website builds, our CRM, the kind of Salesforce system.
Right.
And then about the remainder was for that customer support and admin.
Okay, all right, great. And then, speaking to this, do you know what is that what is the cost for each additional that we're serving?
Yes, well, so the nice thing about this service is that SMUD only charges us for the time spent with customers. Even, it is a live service and they provide that coverage. They're not charging us for every hour of the day. So there is we did run some numbers, based on the original budget, was on the order of several $100s per customer, kind of all in. That's including all of our admin, Salesforce costs. We expect probably some of those costs per customer to go down because we're just getting a higher volume from when we started, because there's more people that know about the program and are returning to the service. So some of these costs per customer. And I will say that 3,800 is just estimated. Again, we could see, increases based on your district rules, other program announcements. We saw an increase when our rebates changed, that kind of stuff.
Okay, that's great. And then when they call in, let's say customer calls in, are they passed to someone else if they have a different need, or is it kind of they stick with that agent and that whoever is servicing them and they take them through the whole?
Yeah, we definitely try to stick with the same single person as much as possible. They do have kind of multiple staff supporting this program. So if sometimes there might need to be like kind of a warm handoff to someone else purely because of it's a really technical question. Sure. So the person who does the electrification plans is like an in-house technical expert that wouldn't be, on a call for a rebate question. So there is some kind of, but usually that initial advisor still stays on the call so that they're always there. And then also all of the kind of interactions are recorded in the system so that if customer is calling back, anyone who's taking that call, whether it's the same person or it might just be a different person, it's still only like a few people that support it, but they have that record to see, has this customer called in the past? Did they already talk about rebates? So now maybe we're talking about contracted quotes. So there's a system in place as well to minimize kind of duplication of collecting information over and over again from the customer.
Or maybe they're ready. Yeah, they were.
Yes.
Ready.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I also am supportive of this. It sounds like this is going to end in 2028. I would love to see, I don't know if you've thought about looking at having someone build out an AI product for us. I know that lots of, my husband works in AI and they're doing tons of products for different agencies and uses. And this would be something that maybe we could save on that by building out a product for ourselves that we might be able to use, so.
Yeah, just to say, it is something that we're looking at. And I think, as Jasmine said, we're doing this extension. And then I think the question will be for 2028 and beyond, what does this become? Do we take it in-house? Do we augment it with some sort of chat bot? I mean, this is where we've got our own kind of AI policies and things that we're working through to make sure that we can share, because there's some data that, we wouldn't upload into AI right now. And what does that look like? So finding that path, but yes, definitely in our consideration.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions.
And to build off, not of the AI, but all these avenues, phone, email, and chat, are kind of engaging with the real person. Sometimes chat may not feel like that they're real, but anyway, assuming this is not AI, is there some sort of, so for someone to, let's say I wanted to explore this, but I didn't really want to get an exchange with a real person. I wanted to get a rough look at being able to answer some of the basic questions that probably all the customers have to answer before I decide that I want to engage in a phone call or an email exchange. Chat's has less of a barrier to entry, I feel, but the others are kind of a commitment time. It's really hard to get me to make a phone call, right? So is there some preliminary tool that gives me the feeling that this is worth my time to have that phone call or the email exchange, just out of curiosity? You didn't mention it, so I don't think there is, but.
That's it.
I mean, generally how we refer to the advisor, we include it in a lot of our materials. It's often sometimes at the end of a page. So if, someone's interested in rebates, we try to direct them to that page first. And then it's like, basically, if you still have questions, come to the advisor. So that's maybe one way where we're trying to,
The website itself has some of the answers. Okay, yeah, that's, okay, got it, thank you.
Okay, well, we don't really have time to talk about it now, but another thing this brings to mind is how are we doing with rebates and, handing out rebates and the money. So maybe in a future meeting, learn about that?
A couple months ago, we had Napur come to the board and give a presentation,
true, yeah.
and that did have some of that, but if there's more information that we
Yeah,
can provide, we definitely can do that, yeah.
And we provide updates in the CO, quarterly
Yeah,
updates
quarterly, there's
too.
also
Yeah,
quarterly
those are the
updates, but
quarterly.
yeah.
Okay. All right, well, so then this is an action item and we need to have public comment, right? So is there any public comment on this? Mr. Carney?
I have gotten good feedback from friends who have used this. Pretty clearly, the end of the EV incentives spiked your demand last year. And I anticipate that if the airport makes new rules about heat pumps and water heaters, it will respike it. Over the last 2 months, I have been AI'd to death. I just can't tell you how happy I am that this is an HI interface. It's at the other end of the line. And if one were to want to use AI to answer the questions you would ask a human for free, you can just go into the search bar in Google and type the thing you would have sent to Sacramento, and you'll probably get a pretty good answer. So I would encourage SVCE to keep the human in the loop as long as you can. And I believe Eric Rodriguez is talking to David Kane, who's the leader of a small group called Electrification Collaborative, which basically uses volunteers to try to persuade people to electrify. Throughout cities, you find volunteers doing all sorts of things, like at Shoreline Park, there are rangers who are volunteers, and all they get is an appreciation dinner once a year, I think, and maybe a shirt. And I suspect that there are electrification volunteers beyond these Los Altos Mountain View residents who I've met. There's a next door group, not terribly well subscribed to, called, now I'm blanking on the exact name, but it's basically homeowners who want to electrify, ask questions and answer questions. And so adding that kind of thing and a HEA, Steve Schmidt's organization, to the suite of things that you make visible and available could, I think, only help improve the turnaround time for getting a question answered, which is critical when you are in the midst of negotiation with a contractor or just getting ready to do something.
Okay. Bringing it back to the board.
Oh, make a comment. I just divided one number by the other, works out to around $200 contact. And I think this is a requirement to provide the service, because there's no point in putting all the other money into the rebates, et cetera, if we're not going to help people use those and use them in an effective manner. So that's my one comment. I'll be supporting this, but my other comment is, I think we're leaving it a little too late to the end of the contract. It would have been, when you showed your other alternatives, it would have been good to have a little bit more runway. So I would encourage you to think about that as this contract terminates, and think about it with other contracts that we have. But
Yeah, I'll respond to that. We have an internal initiative on that as well. And we're actually looking at software to help us monitor contracts before they get to that point. But yes, it's something that as an organization in our kind of evolution and maturity, we're looking at how do we not do this at the last minute so that it almost feels like you don't really have an alternative. So, but I certainly appreciate that input.
Okay. All right, so do I have a motion?
I have a motion, or I would make a motion to approve the allocation of $700,000 as set forth in the slide right there. Oh, and authorize the CEO to execute an amendment to extend the term through June 2028.
Great.
Second by Klein.
All right, so all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. All right, do we have any committee or staff remarks? Okay, I just want to say that, I'm always telling people about the water power relationship, and yesterday at UCDC, it was a very different sort of turnabout. We were talking about the permit of a Trans Bay high voltage power line that is laid at the bottom of the bay that apparently takes something like, I don't know, a huge percentage of the energy that San Francisco uses from Pittsburgh to San Francisco. And it was, surprise, surprise, after being in there for 10 years, part of it became unburied and, and they had to, well, I mean, things move around in
Yeah.
geologic situations. So, so
On the earth.
So it was completely, expected. And so we were talking about the maintenance and it just had never been that other way around. So I wanted to share that. Cool. Very cool. It's interesting. Okay, so with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.